So Noni Madueke is on his way to Arsenal in a £52 million deal. What do Chelsea do next? That is the question I want to ask you guys, that you can let me know in the comments down below. Mainly in terms of signing someone, not signing someone, looking elsewhere in the squad to recruit. Because I want to look at that today and some of the players I think Chelsea should be targeting if they are actively looking to go into the market to sign another wide or attacking player in that area of the squad. I also want to give a little bit of a defence for Nicolas Jackson. So that'll be the second half of today's show. Might be unpopular with a lot of you, but I'm going to give you my honest views on Jackson because I've been talking about him potentially leaving along with Noni this summer. So please do like, subscribe, check out all of the content already on the show this week. I've got a Substack up about Noni this week about the for and against for selling him to Arsenal. Tomorrow I will be uploading my big preview for the Club World Cup final against PSG. So don't miss any of that. Subscribe, turn those notifications on, and thank you if you're listening via Spotify, Apple, your favorite podcast provider as well, because I know we have many people who listen to the show and not just watch it on YouTube. So the latest from David Ornstein, we knew that full agreement was nearly there with Chelsea for Madueke to leave, but he's now been given permission to undergo his Arsenal medical, and he will not train with Chelsea in the US on Friday, travel back to the UK. £52 million is what David Ornstein reporting at the moment. I'm not sure if there's any add-ons to that. So it might not go to the height of Anthony Elanga and some of the other deals we've seen for players of a similar age profile, kind of area of the pitch, left wing, right wing, in terms of experience in the Premier League. The reason I've been more relaxed about this, right, I like the player. And I do think it is still a potential risk for Chelsea to let this player go to a direct rival in the Premier League. I think you have to at least contemplate that being a possibility. That's not a guarantee, it's a possibility. I've kind of been resigned or kind of just understanding. I thought this deal was going to happen about a week or two ago. I just kind of felt that. It kind of felt in the air like this was going in one direction, and very quickly and quite clearly as well. It's not just the fact that Chelsea, I think unlike other Chelsea deals we've seen in recent times, I think this clearly has been led by the player. I don't think if Madueke doesn't make it clear he wants to leave or, doesn't agree to those personal terms, I'm not entirely sure Chelsea actively want to sell him. I know we heard early on this summer that he's not for sale, but we'll listen to offers, and that being kind of the usual contradictory briefing we get from Chelsea. But I do think this is maybe a player thing as much as it is a club thing, and the club getting a fee that is suitable that maybe they didn't really even expect to get this summer. So there is that. I mean, in terms of his Chelsea career, played 92 games, scored 20 goals, 9 assists over almost 5,000 minutes for the Blues. When we signed him in January of 2023, I think there was some hope that there was clearly potential there. He'd done a lot of good things outside of the Premier League, and coming back to England and maybe proving Spurs wrong, who obviously he left at an early age, and, proving himself again in the Premier League and going to another level. I felt very early on watching on, it was very hard to judge him in that mad second half of the season when he joined. You couldn't really judge anyone seriously because it was such a mental time with an extremely bloated squad. But when things settled down and Pochettino arrived and he started to gain minutes, I was a fan of him. I think he is a consistently effective player. Whether he gets the minutes he desires at Arsenal, I'm still not entirely sure, especially off the right. Bukayo Saka's going to play, so he's going to have to probably compete for minutes on the left. Other than that, he's going to be an understudy. And why I think maybe there would have been other potential places he could have gone this summer that would have been better for him, or just stay at Chelsea where I think he could have kept playing football. I do think he has improved at Chelsea. I don't think he is a rubbish player. I don't think he is a useless player. As we're going to get to with the other player we're speaking about today, I think there are very binary and very simplistic kind of stereotype kind of looks and 2D looks at Noni Madueke as a player that I don't think reflect the actual reality of what he did at Chelsea. I do think there is obviously frustration. There is obviously inconsistency. There is obviously times where he's done things and played in a way that I don't think has been best for his team, or, you know, maybe to a level that people really desire. But I think when you actually look at the numbers, and I particularly think the way he developed as a player under Maresca last season, I did think he went on another level. I do think there was a little less predictability, the ability late on to shift onto the left. So I hope that, because I was looking at Noni and I felt he could have gone on to an even better level this year. That's no longer the case. We have to put that in the past now. And I feel and hope that Chelsea, not only with the players they've got right now and have bought in this summer, but what could happen in the future, you know, Chelsea will look back at this deal as maybe with a little bit of regret, but it's not going to be like a major mistake, a major blunder. Why did we let that player go? I really do hope that is not the kind of direction of travel, and instead we're going to be looking at a player who, you know, had some good moments with Chelsea, but we got a good fee and we reinvested properly, or the players we have right now proved to be a lot better than him going into the future. Because you got to remember, it's not just Pedro Neto he's competing with, it's Esteval Willian. We have no idea what he's going to do in English football, but even if he has a comparable season in terms of goals, that is a positive for Chelsea. And you add in the total of other players within the squad. Cole Palmer maybe rediscovers his goal scoring touch. We've been through this before. Liam Delap, Joao Pedro obviously had an incredible night in America on Tuesday, and whether he can continue that on a consistent basis. And other players like Jamie Gittins, who could add an end product too, that make this exit not feel that relevant in 6 to 12 months. The other thing is whether Chelsea take this money and reinvest on players Arsenal fans would like to see their own club sign. And that, I think, is a fear from an Arsenal fan perspective. We've seen the petitions against Noni Madueke signing. We've seen the desperation or fear that Chelsea are going to basically take these new funds and reinvest them in a player that Arsenal and Arsenal fans would like to see join the Emirates as well. And that, of course, is Rodrygo, who it's quite clear has no future at Real Madrid. We spoke about Rodrygo quite a few months ago, and you have to make it abundantly clear there has been no concrete links really at all to from Rodrygo to Chelsea. And it's also, I think, you have to throw into the narrative here and kind of the destiny of the player and where he might see himself is clearly a frustration of maybe wanting to play in a certain position and not getting that at Real Madrid on a consistent basis, and whether he would get that at Chelsea and whether he'd want to move to Chelsea this summer. But I do think he would be a high caliber addition, someone who has, you know, played at the highest level, played at a massive club. I think does still have years to go of potential, and maybe is someone that Chelsea could sign that I think would really raise some eyebrows, and I think would be another level of signing. It wouldn't just be a raw potential signing, it would be seen as a for here and now type signing. The other player is Eberechi Eze, of course, from Crystal Palace, who I am a huge fan of. I don't really know many people who don't like Eze as a player. I think, you know, even if you're not someone that thinks he's like the greatest player in the Premier League, I think there is an admiration for him. I think there is an understanding he is a brilliant talent. Great thing about Eze is, and I think Arsenal maybe are looking, and Arteta could look at him to play on the left of the attack. That could work for Chelsea, but also maybe as an inside forward, maybe, you know, linking up with a centre forward, maybe even, you know, him and Palmer playing as kind of number 10s. I think Eze would be an incredible signing. And I think the thing is with Eze as well, you've got to factor in from Crystal Palace point of view. It's a bit like the Mark Guehi situation where they need to sell him this summer to gain the biggest fee. So financially, there may be a bit of pressure there. Now, again, there is kind of no concrete links at the moment. These are two names that I'm thinking of to kind of make a statement for Chelsea to go out there and use this money in the best way possible to make people forget very quickly and make people think, yeah, all right, like I understand why you sold Noni now, because you're bringing in someone who's going to instantly upgrade the team, instantly walk into it. And in the process, and I want to make this abundantly clear, you should not be signing players just to annoy Arsenal fans or to annoy a rival. It's stupid. You know, Mudryk, I remember at the time Mudryk, I said this as well, and look how that's turned out, right? It should not be about bragging rights. It should be whether this player is going to upgrade your football team. Does he suit what you want to do as a football team? That should be the most important thing from a football point of view. And I think for both Eze and Rodrygo, I do think there is footballing logic behind it as well. It's just, you know, there is a narrative and an irony that it's a player Arsenal have also shown clear interest in this summer. So we'll see if that develops, or another alternative that I'll post to you that you can let me know in the comments down below whether you agree or disagree with. The money for Noni gets used elsewhere. I mean, listen, right? Does that money directly get, but you know what I mean? Like the fee that's going to come in from Arsenal instead gets used to goalkeeper, left back. Those are the two areas that I still think need to be recruited that I spoke about the other day. So let me know in the comments below, not only about this move, are you happy with the fee being reported and Noni's Chelsea career? Let me know down in the comments below. So I also wanted to speak about Nicolas Jackson. Now, unlike Noni Madueke, there's no concrete links at the moment saying, yeah, he's definitely going to go and this is the club that are coming in for him. It's more just kind of murmurings, as we've heard for a few months now, that Jackson's time at Stamford Bridge may be limited. Fabrizio Romano tweeting that Nicolas Jackson has chances to leave Chelsea this summer after Madueke to Arsenal. He could be the next one to try a new chapter elsewhere. AC Milan have asked for Jackson, but Chelsea asking price is still too high. Premier League clubs are also keen and informed. I would be intrigued to see what price that is. And as I'm about to get into, I think it should be bigger than Noni's fee because I think the stats just back this up. Nicolas Jackson, I understand why there's a negative feeling around him at the moment. We always talk about this, right? Why are there feelings and negative feelings at times by fans about the club, about a coach, about a player? And I think 9 times out of 10, not always, sometimes it's illogical, but I think you have to sometimes just look at what's happened in recent times. Nicolas Jackson did 2 really stupid things on the pitch that cost his team in a game and actually could have cost them a lot more. The Newcastle red card could have cost Chelsea in such a damaging way. Luckily, it didn't, and the season ended positively and we got Champions League football. In the case of the Flamengo game, it cost his team in a big way to try and get back into that game. In the end, it didn't really matter because, Chelsea were able to get a more favourable part of the draw in the Club World Cup. And of course, since that happened, we've signed Joao Pedro, we've signed Liam Delap. Joao Pedro had an incredible full debut the other night, and people have kind of given up on Jackson. I have not given up on Nicolas Jackson, and I do not think Chelsea can afford to lose both Noni and Nicolas Jackson in the same summer. The reason why, particularly with Nicolas Jackson, is I just look at numbers and I look at, it's not just numbers, it's the eye test, and it's what he has provided to Chelsea at kind of a decent level from what was expected of him 2 years ago when we signed him from Villarreal. I'm going to say this, and I know many people disagree, and fair enough, right? Everyone could disagree with me, as they usually do. I think Nicolas Jackson has been a good signing for Chelsea. I think he's been a good player for Chelsea. I don't think he's been a great player for Chelsea. I don't think anyone can really seriously argue that. But I have no patience really for the argument that he has been a terrible player for Chelsea. The way people talk about Nicolas Jackson, you would think this guy is Timo Werner. And I had a debate with Louis Benavente on the Chelsea Echo about this, that, perception of, say, Timo Werner, who I know he was involved in a Champions League win, but really was one of the worst footballers I've ever watched play for Chelsea. And his goal output was atrocious for the money we paid for him at the time. Jackson doesn't even come close to that for me. If you look at his 2 seasons at Chelsea, the first was obviously a lot better, where he's getting up to nearly 20 goals in all competitions. The closest in Premier League goals anyone has come to Tammy Abraham's 18, I think it was, in 1920 under Frank Lampard. That's non-penalty goals. And of course, the closest Tammy was at the time to Diego, who scored 20 goals in 14-15 and 16-17 when we won the Premier League title. So you have to factor that in with all of the other strikers that have played in the era since Diego left, because it's been a very difficult time for Chelsea to replace Diego. They still really haven't. So, and the Tammy and Jackson comparison, just because of what I've heard about him, and when I bring up his numbers and say I think there is more to his game that is really decent, and I think as a squad player, I think he's a very valuable squad player. I don't know why you just let those goals walk out the door. It was very similar with Tammy Abraham. People were very happy to let those goals walk out the door. And listen, Tammy Abraham, I did think had one or 2 good seasons at Roma. His career really hasn't gone to the place I thought it would. He's had a lot of terrible injury problems, but really the fear is you let those goals walk out the door. Whatever that player does after that, you have to replace those goals. And of course, I think Chelsea really didn't in an effective way. And that's my fear. You've let goals walk out the door with Noni, which I think can be replaced, hopefully overall, but as well with Jackson, if you let his goals walk out the door, which at a minimum in his second season, he's at least hitting 10 goals a season for Chelsea at the moment. That's kind of, if 10 is his low point, that's not a bad low point for what many people deem can be a decent rotational option. I think his link up, I think his movement, I think his work rate for the team, his pressing from the front, I think there is so much to like about Jackson. And it's not arguing that Jackson is ever going to be the greatest centre forward, is the greatest centre forward, and should play head and shoulders above everyone else. I think it's great that finally we have decent options to rotate around with Jackson. And actually, as I've brought up before, I'd be very intrigued to see him used in other positions around a centre forward to see how he could develop further. And I'd like to think that Jackson as a player would back himself to do that. Now, it might be a Madueke situation where the player reportedly wants to look for new chances elsewhere, but then you are taking a risk. And I think what you're doing then in a season where we need a big squad, this is for me kind of, I think the argument that's very hard to argue against, because Chelsea need a big squad. We have no idea what the collateral damage of the Club World Cup is going to be to this group of players, this long season that's kind of never ended. And going straight back into a Premier League season where we have ambitions to improve, we have ambitions to compete in the Champions League. Having a big squad and giving Maresca, as he has in this tournament, the tools to rotate properly are essential. And I want as much as that as possible. And I just don't know why you'd want to take the risk for Jackson to walk out the door, which probably then does mean, I think with Noni, you could maybe make the case that, well, numbers wise, we maybe actually don't need to go out and sign any other attackers that we've already got enough in kind of bodies. I think if you let Jackson go, then you probably do need to go out and sign someone else. And you may even feel you need to sign another centre forward because you're letting those goals walk out the door. And, I think that in a Premier League sense, I could see Man United being in for him. I could see Aston Villa. I mean, maybe if you're doing a swap deal, separate deal type thing for Morgan Rogers, I could kind of accept it, or maybe even Ollie Watkins coming the other way. I'd be looking at that. In terms of a fee, if Noni's going for 50 million, I think you add 20 million, 25 million more for Jackson. Because those goals for Chelsea have been important. And although Jackson, I think, has obviously had some really poor performances, I think his finishing has been disappointing. And I think on the pitch, he's done things that have massively derailed kind of building his reputation up, which deserve criticism. I do think I'm not saying all people who've kind of really got tired of Jackson are doing this, but I do think some people have looked at Jackson, made a quick analysis on him based on like his first few weeks at the club back in the summer of 23, and have never adjusted those expectations or perception of him, no matter what he's done, no matter what good games he's had, no matter what goals he's put up, no matter what the numbers are, the way he's linked up with other players around him. People have they make a perception of a player. We see this so often, negative or positive. I think it's almost like the João Felix thing is the opposite. It seems like no matter how bad João Felix is at a number of clubs, you still have people who think he's like this incredible talent. And I think it's the reverse with Jackson. And that's not me saying that Jackson is a world-class, incredible, astonishing talent like Cole Palmer and Moises Caicedo in the current team. But what I'm saying, I think he's a very, very decent squad player that I'd prefer to have in this squad moving forward with Enzo Maresca. I think it's better just for safety to not take that risk, to keep him. In 9 months' time, hopefully Delapa scored goals, João Pedro, and you then are at a point where you can look at the numbers and go, well, actually, the players around him are growing, developing, have clearly usurped him in the first team, and then maybe you then have the conversation of moving him on. For me at the moment, I don't want to take that because you've already lost Noni, who I do think had a good season. Don't want to lose Jackson, not because he's the greatest player ever. I want to keep on cementing that because you will have people who think I'm saying that Jackson is bigger than Chelsea Football Club. Jackson is the greatest player to ever play for Chelsea. No, that's not the point I'm making. I want to make that abundantly clear. The point I'm making is I think he's a decent squad player, and I think you're just risking too much letting him go. And I think that the idea that he's a useless player, I just have very little time for. I just don't think the numbers and the way, even the perception of him when he came into Chelsea, I don't think anyone expected it. I think a lot of people anticipated he wasn't going to do anything at the club. And at times I think he's usurped those expectations. So those are my thoughts. Maybe a little bit of a mini rant about Jackson, but it's something I feel passionately because it's just, I try and, analyze players, and, if players do things that, my initial perception and kind of an assessment on them is proven wrong, whether that be as extreme as Marco Correa, Enzo Fernandez. You know, we love to have a story like that. But, you know, for me, Jackson, I watched the Newcastle review, watched the Flamengo review. I am not holding back about Jackson in either of those reviews. So I'm not here someone that's blind to Jackson. When he has bad performances, I criticise him. And I'm not sitting here and telling you that you are unfair to criticise and feel that Chelsea should upgrade on him. I'm not saying you are wrong to feel like that. And hopefully we have in some ways this summer. But I am still firmly of the belief he's a good squad player. So those are my thoughts today. Please let me know yours in the comments below. And I will see you again very, very soon. All the best.